went to middle school during the early 2010s boom of dystopian literature and films. The Hunger Games was coming out and everyone was so on board with the dystopian train that they just kind of missed the entire point of why the Hunger Games was popular. But what this meant is that we got a ton of dystopian Hunger Game knockoffs, and honestly, I didn't read any of them. And I know that some people really enjoyed them at the time. Hindsight is 2020. I want to give them a shot. So today I'm doing another episode of reading something for the very first time. And I don't think this one's going to be as popular or even well known. I have no idea how popular this book was when it came out, but it seemed like it was everywhere. And that is the Matched Trilogy by Allie Condie. Even if you haven't read these books, if you were a teen or a preteen in the early 2010s, you definitely saw these covers and probably, like me, were intrigued by them. They never were made into a movie, and I'd never read them myself. But I remember seeing them all the times in different classrooms next to the Hunger Games and Divergent. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to finally satiate my inner preteen. I don't have anything else to say. Let's dive right in.
Right off the bat, we are introduced to Cassia as a very stereotypical, not like other girls figure. She's the only one wearing green, she's the only one who gets paired to someone in her same community, and she even makes a comment about liking her compact because it's small, just like she is small. Also, prediction, but Xander's definitely not going to get picked, right? Because he's the traditional guy next door, blonde-haired guy. We are now introduced to our alternate love interest, Kai, and what do you know? He's the stereotypical third point on the love triangle. With his tan skin, dark hair, and bad boy personality, what a perfect alternative to the typical boy next door.
So I'm about 3 chapters in, and I'm actually really liking it so far. And it reminds me a bit of the novel Brave New World, which I'm sure if you're like a big classics buff, you're probably so upset with me for saying that this book reminds me of Brave New World. But it does actually kind of make sense. The fact that they have limited the amount of books and songs and art and poems, because how can you appreciate if there's too much? Like, that kind of makes sense. Like, there are people who have that argument of like there's like an oversaturation of media. I've said that before as well. Not saying that we should stop making stuff, but there is a nugget of truth. And I think that's a mark of like a really good novel set in the future or a dystopian world, is that you have to make it make sense why things are the way they are. And while I don't really like agree with the idea of like optimizing human beings, it makes sense why the society would be like, oh, well, we're able to use data to determine what is the best choice for you. It's crazy because like that is very much the idea of like AI. This book came out in 2011, and I feel like so far the way that this society works in it is very relevant.
We then meet Cassia's family, starting with her grandfather, who is dying at the age of 80, which is what the society decides all people die at. And he shows her that in her compact, he has hidden a small poem that is not part of the 100 poems. She realizes that this poem has been banned because it tells people to fight. We also meet Cassia's parents, and I actually really love her parents because they have such a sweet relationship with each other. And I think that adds a really interesting level where sometimes the matchings are actually successful, and the people that they match up together are actually in very loving relationships.
This book is so funny to me because it manages to be really stereotypical while also having these like moments of like genuinely really moving parallels. Cassia deciding to destroy the poem that her grandfather gave her, and her dad choosing to destroy the biosample from her grandfather so that he can control when he dies on his own terms. There's this parallel but also this contrast there where Cassia is destroying this because it's dangerous and she's trying to protect her family, and her father destroys the biosample from her grandfather for a completely different reason. He's destroying it because her grandfather doesn't want to do what the rules say. And that is like a really interesting, very moving moment. But then you also at the same time have pages and pages of Cassia just thinking about Kai's eyes and his hair and his hand on her arm. And it's just really funny to me. There are such like stereotypical I'm a teenager and I'm in a love triangle moments.
Now let's get into the other relationships in Cassia's life. Honestly, I love her relationship with her friend Em. I love that we get to see these moments of this real friendship that is very meaningful, but at the same time, I'm also very annoyed by her relationship with Xander. She hasn't told him about Kai, and so there's a lot of miscommunication just because she's sitting around thinking about this other guy while he's around moping.
Alright, we are about halfway through, so let's do a little bit of a check-in. I'm kind of back and forth with it because on the one hand there are parts of it that I find really stereotypical, typical YA love triangle dystopian, but then on the other side there are things that I think they do really well. The last section I just read in the middle is that because Cassia let her friend borrow her compact for her matching ceremony, now the officials have decided that no one can have artifacts, which means that they have to give their stuff up. We are getting to a boiling point within the way that this society works. One of the things that I think works really well about this is that as opposed to something like The Hunger Games, where you go into this book immediately seeing, oh, this world is awful and like people are being mistreated, Cassia lives in a relatively well-off part of the society, and so she doesn't really see the issues in the way things work. We get to watch Cassia slowly realize, hey, this is not as great as I thought it was.
Another really interesting aspect of this book is how everything is observed by officials of the society. And because of this, Kai purposely throws games during game nights to make sure that they don't see him as more intelligent. I think it's really interesting that this character has thought so much about how he should hide himself so that he ends up flying under the radar. At this point, things start to happen really quickly. All the artifacts are taken away. Cassia gets told that they know about her relationship with Kai and is told to stop seeing him. In fact, Cassia herself even comments on the fact that things seem to be happening a lot faster than they normally do. Something just happened and it kind of annoyed me because I thought that they were going to do something really great and then they just sort of backtracked on it. Cassia is talking about how on her brother's first day of school, he didn't want to get on the train and it was drawing attention and they were really worried that an official was going to see them, and Cassia is able to very quickly trick him to being okay with going to school. And she starts by saying, oh, you're never going to be able to read or write. Do you want to grow up or do you just want to be a baby? Using that tauntingness of an older sister. And then she uses the promise of, oh, I know how to play games on your scribe and I'll show you how to do that. And she comes up with these games because there isn't any and hides them within the scribe so that he can be happy. And that story, I think, tells us so much about Cassia because it shows us that she cares so deeply about her brother and she's so protective of him, and this follows a moment where she snaps at him, but it shows that she does care about him and she's able to leverage the expectations that are placed on them on how to act to sort of loophole her way around them to protect him. And it also shows us that Cassia has always sort of been somewhat against the officials. Even from the beginning, we thought she was so okay with everything that was going on in the society. And I was so pleased because I thought, oh wow, they're doing this really great, show don't tell. We're learning a lot about Cassia's character. We're not just being told, oh, I was smart and I cared about my brother. We're being shown all these things. And then immediately we follow it up with Kai telling her that that was the moment that he cared for her. Because I saw the way you cared about your brother and because I saw that you were smart enough to help him. To me, it feels very much like, okay, well now we're going to explain what that meant to you, like why that's important. I do think that there was perhaps a little bit of room for giving us those moments without spelling out what they meant. I haven't been reading a lot, but I do just have to mention this because it's so funny to me that we have these moments that seem so relevant to the present day. Cassie's talking about this song that she loves and she said, the woman who sings it has such a beautiful voice. If only it were real, he says. What do you mean? I ask him. He looks at me surprised. Her voice, it's not real, it's generated. The perfect voice, like all of the singers in all of the songs. I thought about angels, I say. Angels, the ones from the old stories. How they can fly to heaven. Do you think anyone believes in them anymore, he asks. I don't know. No, do you? I believe in you, he says, his voice hushed and almost reverent. That's more faith than I ever thought I'd have. R.I.P. Kai Markham, you would have loved Hosier. I'm genuinely I don't know how I didn't think of this. Let's say, okay, so Cassia has her first like sorting job, and she has the realization that the reason that her grandfather couldn't share his food at his banquet is because they poisoned the food for the elderly. And like that was, oh my gosh. That's crazy to me. I think obviously I understood like, oh yeah, you die at 80. It's controlled, probably like a euthanasia type situation. But I didn't think about the fact that it would be that the deaths are not controlled, as she just seemed to believe that it always happened at 80 for some reason. Also, the fact that it's in the food is like such a sneaky thing to do. We now get to dive into Cassia's relationship with her mother even more, with the two of them bonding over their matched dresses, as well as having to make really difficult decisions in order to protect their family. I really love these small moments where instead of focusing on big action, we get to see Cassia as someone in relation to her family, someone who is caring and afraid, and I honestly think that it humanizes this character a lot. Now Kai has also seen Cassia. He was also told, and now we're getting really mysterious. I want to know how he ended up in the database. Also, Xander is being really annoying after Cassia told him. I mean, honestly, fair enough. The person you thought you were going to spend your life with tells you they're falling in love with someone else. You have a right to be upset. But I find his lack of communication skills irritating. Okay guys, it's getting really interesting. Kai just got taken away for a new work assignment in the middle of the night, and they're woken up to his adoptive mother screaming. She and her husband know that they're actually taking him away to go fight the enemy on the borders. The whole neighborhood is there, everyone's sort of questioning what's happening, and then they're told to take these red pills that they all carry around with them that they don't know what they do, but they realize they're to make them forget what just happened. Willingly, slowly, one by one, taking these tablets, they all have their own families to look after. It's this jarring moment to switch between them all being like, well, what is going on? And watching the Markhams being pulled away, bound and gagged, to immediately obeying. And then Cassia crushes her tablet under her foot. And it's she's not very subtle, but the official doesn't say anything about it because Cassia needs to remember, and she wants her to remember what she's done. There's an earlier moment as well where Cassia is confronted by the official about having a fling, and she says like, oh, we figured that this would probably happen, where you would, fall for Kai Markham. Becomes this idea that is there a form of rebellion that isn't already known in the society where everything you do is calculated and everything that you do is based on statistics and they know exactly what's going to happen? Is there a way in which your rebellion can ever be your own, or is it always going to be exactly what they expected of you? I genuinely just gasped out loud. I've been saying I want to know how Kai accidentally ended up in the matching system, and it wasn't an accident. The fact that the whole thing was like an experiment, and the fact that every single part of him connecting with Cassia, the fact that she's had smaller portions, that was another thing I was like, why is that, like, it keeps bringing that up, how is that important? Doing these things to just stress her out, to see her as a person, like with the matching system, and the fact that she was gonna write an academic article about Cassia's reaction is just, ugh. Like, I could not have seen that coming. I can't go over the fact like I was gonna write an article about you is so funny to me. All right, guys, that is the end of Matched. There were definitely things about it that annoyed me, that were sort of the stereotypical YA love triangle dystopian fiction, but there were also so many well-written moments, things that have remained really relevant, like the importance of art and the way that things are regulated. AI happened to come up. There were some genuinely really interesting reveals, like the fact that Kai was placed in there and then everything that happened with him was a regulated experiment. Right after that, it's revealed that Kai wasn't placed in there by the society, and they just sort of took advantage of the fact that he was there. I love the relationship between Cassie and her parents. I love that her parents do love each other. Goodness has come out of the things that have happened with the society, even though there is a lot of bad, and it is mainly bad. I was pleasantly really surprised by Matched, and now I'm gonna dive into the second book, which is Crossed, which I'm realizing this one's blue, the first one is green, The third one is red, and which is the color of the 3 tablets. The green for stress, the blue for survival, and the red for forgetting. First things first, this book is off to a great start because y'all know I love a map in a book, and this one is so gorgeously illustrated. We also get a couple of poems in this book as well. We start with Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night, one that has been very relevant to the first book, and then into Crossing the Bar, another poem that becomes more important in this book. This book is also interesting because we get a split perspective narrative. In the previous book, we were only listening to Cassia's perspective, but in this one, we get both Cassia and Kai. Just as a heads up, this book has a lot less footage simply because I was ill and trying to get this done before the book was due at the library. Only a couple chapters in, I'm already liking Xander better than I did the first book, simply because he's much better at communicating. This book follows Cassia and Kai as they are in the outer provinces trying to get back to each other. And the unfortunate thing is that the two just miss each other. Kai ends up allying with 2 new people, Vic and Eli, and escapes from one of these outer provinces to run to a place called the Carving. Cassie arrives at this place with her new friend Indy shortly after they leave. And it's honestly a bit weird because it is significantly easier for her and Indy to get to the Carving than it is for the boys. But honestly, what do I know about running for your life? This book is a lot slower paced than the first book, where instead of all this action and this chaos happening as society is slowly falling apart, we focus instead on Kai, Vic, and Eli, and Cassia and Indy navigating through the caves and the caverns of the Carving. And honestly, I don't really mind that. This is actually something that is really common with a lot of YA trilogies for some reason, where the first book is really intense to draw you in, and then the second book is a little bit slower as they set up the third act. In another great moment in this book, we actually get another instance of Cassia being very intelligent when she notices that the walls in the cavern are much too smooth and therefore must be a result of the society's presence. I love these moments because they show how Cassia has her strength and intelligence rather than her physical strength such as Indy does. One of the things this book does really well is making you unsure if the new allies that these characters have are trustworthy. Vic is really hard to trust, he's very jaded, and the same is true of Indy. She's a very cagey person and is known for hiding things, so you're left wondering if this is someone that you can actually rely on. Finally, after a whole book of missing each other, Cassia and Kai are finally reunited, and it's genuinely a really sweet moment. This book also has a lot of incredible reveals while also maintaining the mystery. We have this reveal of the blue pills not actually being for survival, but instead to kill you, and the fact that the society has a secret lab filled with tubes of biosamples of both dead and living citizens. But the reasons for this are not revealed, which adds a lot of mystery and sets things up perfectly for the third book. This is the first time I've had to stop and actually talk about something that's happened because we're very far into the book. We just got Xander's secret revealed. He's part of the Rising. Like, that's crazy to me. But honestly, if I think back to it, it kind of makes sense. Because even in the first book, Xander was so, willing to do things that were kind of, gently pushing against the boundaries. Giving their friend the extra green pill from his capsule. Hiding the artifact for Cassia. There is these small moments that we do see, and we see them through Cassia's lens of her not knowing about the Rising at the time. In a similar way, we do see these moments of rebellion from Cassia where she's willing to do these small things, the small things that she can do to rebel. I wasn't expecting that to be something that would happen, but honestly, it kind of makes sense. Eventually, Cassia and Kai's group meet someone named Hunter, who is a last member of a farmer society who has been living in the caverns. As they learn more about what the society has been doing, they make their way to the Rising, the rebellion against the society, and find out that they're going to be separated, Cassia being sent as a spy back to the society, and Kai and Indy as pilots for the Rising. They also find out about a figure called the Pilot, a mythological type figure who leads the Rising, who Cassia suspects has been hinted at through the poems that her grandfather has left her. It wasn't my intention to read the entire book in a day, but
that's the entire book in a day. I enjoyed it. I think, though, that it needs to be expanded upon. One of the things that I found complaining about a lot with this book was that I wasn't getting enough information about characters. The author is really intent on giving you a lot of information about our main characters, about Cassia and Kai. But then we have our other characters like Indy. Indy's a character who we're just introduced to. She's a good person, but you can't really trust her on most things. I don't feel like I really know anything about her. But I will say this about Indy. I like the bare bones that we got of her. I just wish they had been built upon her a bit more. And we don't necessarily have to reveal stuff about her because I understand that she is sort of mysterious and that makes sense. But I do think it would have been great to just have more of Indy and have her really be a part of the story more. And the same with Eli, and the same for Hunter, who we meet as well. I just feel like I don't really know that much about these characters. There are still those moments of, wow, this is like a super stereotypical like YA love triangle book, but then there are also those moments of, this is actually quite poignant and like this is actually fairly relevant. I'm gonna leave it at that for now, and I will get started on the next book sometime soon.
Alright, so it's been a while since the last time I've been reading this book. I've been very busy, but we're finally diving in to the third book in the Matched Trilogy, which is Reached.
This book builds on the last by adding another perspective for us to read from, which is Xander's. Through this book, we begin by seeing what the three of them are now doing as agents of the Rising, with Xander working as a medic, with Cassia working as a sorter, and with Kai acting as a pilot for the Rising.
In this chapter, we're seeing Xander working as like a medical officer, and we find out about the plague that's happening and how the Rising is waiting for the plague to kind of take over so that people can see that, oh, the society can't cure everything. Now the problem here is that the Rising has a cure, so it can be cured. They're just not sharing it, meaning they're willingly letting people, including this 2-year-old boy who we just saw get it for the first time, die. Which begs the question, are we going to start diving into the idea that the Rising's not all good?
One really great moment in this book is when Cassia experiences an event at her work which causes them to tell all the workers to take the red pill. And what she finds out is that she is not immune to this pill, which is something that Kai and Xander are. And I really love that detail because it makes it so that she's not so special. She's not immune to this pill. She's just like everybody else, a normal person who's been dragged into this.
I just finished part 1, which is called Pilot, part 2, which is now Poet, which is interesting because I actually forgot that I started and there was a part 1 called Pilot, so I'm interested of what the other parts might be called. Kai is now literally a pilot. Cassia just suggested writing poems that she could trade with the archivist, and if we're gonna get one for Xander, and maybe it'll be Physic. I am a little bit worried because we're only 100 pages in. The Rising has already made itself known, and it seems like it's gonna work out. I mean, maybe it's not gonna work out. Maybe we're gonna find out pretty quickly that there's like a whole lot more fighting that they have to do. The fact that we seem to have settled this so quickly, and the fact that they've immediately come into the society, makes me think that something is gonna go very wrong.
Since the Rising has taken over the society so quickly, we now focus on the lives of our main three after the society has fallen. We look at Cassia, who has now become a trader for the archivist, finding antiques and trading them with people. We see that Cassia is trying to prevent people from giving away their most prized possessions, instead offering something she has created. And again, it really enforces the importance of human creativity and art.
This is something that has caught me off guard. Xander is on his own and Cassie is also on her own. But Kai is with Indy, and there's a part where they're all like jumping into the river and he's reminded of Cassia jumping into the pool, and he says, I have to stop this. I don't have to love Indy the way I do Cassia, but I do have to stop thinking about Cassia when I look at Indy. It seems like maybe Kai is getting into a new love triangle where he loves Cassia, but he's starting to feel something for Indy. Maybe I'm reading too much into this. Maybe this is another Aragorn and Eowyn situation.
Well, I was right about part 3 being called Physic. Interesting to see Cassia kind of taking this leadership role. She doesn't really think of herself as a leadership role, and even
The Rising doesn't think that she's right for fighting or flying, and that's honestly fair because Cassia doesn't do those kinds of things, which is something that I kind of like, honestly. A lot of times we have these heroes who are strong women who always have to fight and be physically tough and strong, and Cassia isn't those things, but she's creative and she's kind and she's intelligent, and those to me are just as important traits for a strong female character. And the fact that she is setting up this way for people to share their creative endeavors with each other, I think is really beautiful. Well, I was certainly right about complications because there has been one now. The plague that the Rising had cured has now had a mutation, meaning that their cure doesn't work anymore. Looks like I was right about this book being wrapped up too nicely too soon. I was right. Indy does like Kai, and she just kissed him. I feel like I've redeemed myself because after the Aragorn fiasco, I was a little bit worried about me thinking, is there some sort of love triangle going on with Indy and Kai and Cassia here? And I was right. I feel like I'm repeating myself through this whole thing, but this book series has been so surprising to me at how relevant it is. I love Cassia's sections being focused on the importance of art and the importance of creating and how much the gallery means to her, despite the fact that, as the head archivist says, all these things have been done before and better by other people. Xander is focusing on the medicine and Kai is focusing on the actual military work, and I love that we're seeing these like variations of the different ways that the three of them are involved with the Rising. I love that we are kind of challenging the Rising and challenging the archivists in three completely different ways, but in three ways that really work together perfectly. Well, our trio is finally united and are being sent to the outer provinces to try and find a cure for the mutation of the plague. However, that's not the only reason they're being taken, as the pilot has suspicions that they might not be working for the rebellion.
We just had this big revelation that Cassia's great-grandmother was the former pilot, which is crazy. And which makes sense why her grandfather, who was also apparently part of the Rising, had that poem for her about the pilot.
Our main trio are sent to a community of aberrations and anomalies who they work with to try and find a cure. Well, Cassia and Xander are working with to find a cure. Kai, unfortunately, has succumbed to this plague. The Markham's son, who we believed had died, actually had escaped from society, and that they had wanted him to be out of society because they didn't think it was safe. Sort of in the same sense, Kai's father wanted to keep him out of the outer provinces because he also didn't think it was safe for his son, so he wanted him to go stay with his aunt and uncle.
10 seconds later.
We found out where Matthew Markham is. He is in the other lands. I'm still not entirely sure if I believe that they exist. Oker mentioned that he tried to convince the pilot not to join the Rising because he said it was just the society under a different name. We've been reunited with Eli and Hunter, which is really nice because we haven't seen them since the end of the last book when they all separated.
10 seconds later.
Hunter was left to watch over Kai, and he's taken all of the IVs out of everyone, beaten all the medics to like keep them from stopping him, and his explanation is, I wanted to make it fair. What is happening? We've been getting a lot of history in this town of how it's all connected and how it has to do with the plague, the former plague, and how they have immunity. Oh boy.
10 seconds later.
This section is just revelation after revelation. Oker was one of the people who worked on the original virus, and that's why he's so dedicated to finding a cure. The phrase, the plague is the pilot? I mean, they gotta stop doing this to me.
10 seconds later.
Oker is dead. Presumably from a heart attack, but who knows at this point. Kai's chapters have been getting shorter and shorter. And then we get to this part, and we're just minding our own business, and then we flip and, oh, look at that. It's a completely blank chapter. You're not allowed to
You're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to make me invested in a character and then do something like this, okay? How dare you?
Once again, it is the intelligence of Cassia and the strength of her relationships which saves the day. She realizes that the cure for the plague is actually a type of lily which her mother sent her an origami version of. I think this is just such a beautiful tie-up. The fact that it is the love of her mother that helps her to figure this out, and her intelligence which helps her to save the day.
When the pilot comes to pick them up, he brings bad news. The Rising is starting to fall apart. It's not surprising to me, because everything is kind of falling apart. And I predicted this from the beginning, didn't I? But also the fact that Indy died and they couldn't send anyone to retrieve her body. I mean, it could be incorrect. The fact that there isn't a body does mean maybe we'll see her again, but I also think that could potentially be just a way of showing that sometimes it's not wrapped up and, you know, nice and confirmed. Either it's gonna be like a really sad moment of reality, or it's gonna be she's gonna be back. It's one of those two. It's definitely one of those two. Either she's dead or she's not. There's really the only two options anyways. Okay, this is crazy. So the society didn't actually go away. The society became the Rising. That, oh my gosh. Because, like, remember there was someone else who said the Rising is just a society under a different name. I don't think they knew how right they were. That makes so much sense, because I was wondering, why was it so easy for the Rising to take over? Why did it have, like, no fight back whatsoever? But that makes so much sense that they chose to become the Rising so that there would be a rebellion and people would think they were rebelling, but in actuality they already knew what was going to happen. Oh! Oh my gosh, Allie Condie, the writer that you are. This I don't know how I didn't think of that. I'm in shock. And honestly, like this, read this book.
Now we get a bit of a sad moment when Cassia is reunited with her little brother Bram, because he's been left all by himself and both of his parents have gotten sick. His dad has died, and in order to make money, he has had to take a job identifying bodies for people. You are jerked back into the reality that this is not just an adventure for Cassia and her friends. People have died and terrible things have happened.
So we finally have an answer as how Kai got added into the matching pool, that Cassia added him herself because she was told to by the Rising and then was made to forget about it. I love the idea that Cassia is the one who added him in, because I feel like that is the only time that we've seen true rebellion against the society. Because everything Cassia's done has either been something the society has wanted her to do or something that the Rising has wanted her to do. And even though that was something that the Rising wanted her to do, Cassia's relationship with Kai only developed because she got matched to him. If anything, to me, feels like a little bit of her taking back control.
In the final chapters of the book, there is an election to see who will be the new leader of the society. Will it be the traditional society? Will it be the Rising? Or will it be Anna, the leader of the aberrations and anomalies? And the greatest part is that we don't find out.
Oh dear. Bear with me because I accidentally just kicked over my tripod, so we are dealing with a broken tripod right now. Let's try and get this done quickly. I just finished Reached, which means that I have finished all 3 of the books in the Matched series. And I will say, I am thoroughly impressed.
Reading this series taught me a lesson I didn't expect. I grew up in the era of the Hunger Games, when everyone was writing dystopian novels that missed the point of the Hunger Games' popularity and effectiveness. I assumed that Match was like this too, and I was humbled. Allie Condie's series doesn't try to be the Hunger Games. Instead of being a tough and brash heroine who is physically capable, Cassia is intelligent, kind, and creative. She shows us that you don't need to be physically strong to rebel. There are parts of this trilogy that come across as stereotypical, yes. But somehow this book remains relevant and has something interesting to say that most dystopian novels ignore: the importance of art, the importance of creating. I've been pleasantly surprised at the effectiveness of this series, and I wish the 12-year-old who first saw these books on a shelf had read them, because she would have loved them, and she would have seen herself in Cassia more than she did the other dystopian heroines that she had read. Allie Condie, I'm sorry for ever doubting you, because these books have blown me away.